Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. And today we're on top of turret number 2. Battleship New Jersey is interpreted as if it were around 1990 when the ship made her last active deployment. That's known as our period of interpretation, and we've talked about this a lot. However, we've received some questions about, are there any things on the ship that we have restored or added that are not within our period of interpretation? And the short answer to that question is yes. There are several things around the ship that we have done because even though we've got a period of interpretation, we also are interpreting the ship's complete history. So while we don't want to destroy original fabric of the ship to backdate it with facsimile stuff, which again, we've talked about this a lot in the past, there are a couple of places where the original fabric was so badly destroyed that we chose to restore that space to how it would have looked during an earlier time period. And again, our criteria there are, it can't have a connection to 1990s era crew. We don't want them to come back to see their space and we've destroyed it. It has to be historically significant in that older time period. We're not going to restore a broom closet to how it looked during World War II because we can. It's got to have a good reason. And then 3, of course, is the room has to be incomplete or damaged in some way such that we're not destroying original material to put in the new material. Some examples of this, the only 3 spaces we've done that meet these criteria are the ship's World War II radio room in a space where the Navy removed some of the electronics equipment down below near turret 2, the ship's brig, which had been converted into a weight room, but none of the weight equipment was still there anymore, and the Admiral's Chief of Staff cabin, which had only been used as guest officers' quarters and which had been destroyed by a water intrusion problem coming through the overhead. So in all of these examples, they had a previous historic use that was easier or more effective to interpret than what they were at that time. No connection to any living sailors, and they were in some way incomplete that made it worth bringing in facsimile stuff without having to throw away historic stuff. There are a couple other places where we've done far less radical changes to the ship, and that's why we're on top of turret number 2 today. Having recognition devices on the top side of the ship is very important for the ship when she's receiving aerial spotting in particular. So when there is somebody spotting gunfire support missions for the battleship or for other ships, specifically gunships, it's very important that they can tell what ship they're spotting for, especially since it's not uncommon for ships to operate in groups. And so when we call and say, hey, we need you to spot our fire, and they can't tell whether it's our fire or Missouri's fire, it's important to have some way of knowing that. In the 1980s, the Iowas had 2 ways of telling which was which from the air. Each one received slightly different modifications to the teak deck around the flight deck on the fantail. Wisconsin had a completely redecked ship, so she is basically blonde from stem to stern. The other 3 Iowas received a rubberized coating over their rotting teak wood, and this took different shapes and forms depending on the Iowa. Missouri was pretty much covered from the aft superstructure all the way aft, so she was pretty blonde up forward, dark back aft. New Jersey and Iowa each had some weird stripe works to theirs. Also, at least 2 of the Iowas had recognition numbers on their turrets. I believe in the 80s it was both on the forward turrets. Why is it only 2 instead of all 4? That's because there were only 2 in each fleet. So in the Pacific Fleet, Missouri had 63 on turret number 1. New Jersey didn't have anything. New Jersey didn't add anything when she was first activated. In 1982, she was the only gunship in the fleet. There was no questioning who it was you were providing spotting support for. When Missouri is brought into the Pacific Fleet as well, her crew paints 63 on, I believe it's turret number 1. Likewise, when Iowa is reactivated as the first battleship in the Atlantic Fleet, they paint a really striking American flag on turret number 1. I really like that addition that is unique to Iowa. Because Iowa has that, and it's so visually striking, Wisconsin, as far as I know, never got any sort of hull number herself. And so even when you have multiple Iowas, one from the Atlantic, one from the Pacific, both operating in the Persian Gulf, you've got Wisconsin with that really distinctive all-wood deck. You've got Missouri with about a third of her decking covered by a rubberized roofing compound, and a 63 on her turret number 1. So fairly easy to support those ships with spotting. Turret top recognition goes all the way back to the first aircraft being on battleships. And during these time periods, it's not uncommon for battleships to carry 2 or 3 float planes, and each battleship has this air detachment that is doing the spotting specifically for that ship. So knowing which ship it is vitally important, because you're going to have a battle line of a dozen of these things strung out in a potential naval battle. And so the US Navy did turret top colors for their ships, with the forwardmost turret painted the division color, and then the second turret and final turret, whether that's 4th, 5th, or 6th, depending on how many turrets those turret farms had in the interwar years, would have been the ship's color for where she was in line. So you have ships like Arizona, the lead ship of, I think it was Division 2, has all 3 red turret tops, while the ship behind her would have red, red, white, I believe, and the next one would have red, white, white, something like that. Different divisions would have blue or yellow or black or white for their turret tops. While the battleships had the entire top painted in one solid color, the cruisers tended to have their turret tops painted with a stripe, or a series of stripes down them, depending on their division and their place in line, because they also carried spotter planes. And so this helps you identify which ship you're spotting for, and it helps you find that ship again when you have to land on it later. So, did New Jersey, in her entire career, ever have any turret top spotting devices? As best as we know, during World War II, she had none. She was the only Iowa painted in that distinct black dragon paint scheme. And so that might have been how she was recognizable, particularly, say, at the Battle of Truk Lagoon, where both New Jersey and Iowa are operating together, and New Jersey has aerial spotting. By the end of the war, all 4 are painted in measure 22, but as far as I know, they don't have any recognition devices, so I'm not sure how that was done. During Korea, there tended to be only 1 off the coast of Korea at any given time, and so we're not aware of any turret top devices at that time. In Vietnam, Battleship New Jersey is the only active battleship anywhere in the world. However, the US Navy has a couple of other gunships off the coast, such as the heavy cruisers St. Paul and Newport News, which have relatively similar silhouettes, especially to brown shoe aviators and Army flyers who might not have perfect ship recognition skills. In particular, each has 3 3-gun turrets. And so if that's the visual indicator you're looking for from the air, very difficult to identify the ship. And there's at least one picture of Newport News and New Jersey sailing alongside of each other, so it seems like they did operate in similar areas at the same time, at least on occasion, and so it could cause confusion. So for each of these gunships, they painted their hull number on the back part of turret number 2. Interestingly, the heavy cruisers that received partial missile armaments, Boston and Canberra, do not have any turret top recognitions. They only retain their forward 2 turrets, and the aft part of the ship, much like Little Rock, which has been preserved, was given over to missile spaces. So much harder to confuse one of those ships with one of the gunships like New Jersey. That said, The only reason they may not have had a turret top recognition device is because they had an antenna similar to our disc cone cage antenna at the bow on top of turret number 2, and that might have interfered with being able to paint something there. Not entirely sure what the thought process was. Regardless, during our period of interpretation, New Jersey should not have a turret top recognition device. However, she would have uniquely carried her hull number on top of turret 2 during her Vietnam commission. Her Vietnam commission is one of the most historic for New Jersey because she is the only one of her class that was active at that time. And it's also important for the museum because right now it's our Vietnam crew who are retiring, coming back to visit us. Our 40s and 50s crew have mostly aged out, and it's very rare to get one of them on board, particularly to get one up to the bridge where you guys are looking down at the hull recognition number. And likewise, our 80s sailors, many of them have not retired yet and are still working, so they haven't started visiting and volunteering in the same numbers as our Vietnam era crew. And so, repainting this homage to the ship's Vietnam service does not in any way impact the rest of the greater restoration of the ship. It's really easy for us to come out and just roll deck gray paint over this, and now that has gone away again and we're back in our period of interpretation. What do you think? Do you think New Jersey and other museum ships should be more pure to their period of interpretation and not have things like this that are evidence of earlier time periods? Or do you think they should do more to tell the complete history of the ship? Let us know in the comment section down below. If you could change one thing of this ship back to an earlier time period, what would that be? And what would the interpretive value of doing that be? Let us know in the comment section down below. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support. There's a link in the description below for ways you can donate to support the museum. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find out about the museum and our channel. Thanks for watching.